Welcome into Football and Other F Words. My name is Zach Lyons. You can follow me on Twitter at FWordsPod. You can follow Mike Herndon at Mike Herndon NFL on Twitter, paulkarski.com, where he has a piece up today. Did you happen to watch Robbie and Rexrow this morning?
I did not, actually, no.
Okay, so PK comes on, and he starts complaining about people taking what Daniel Jeremiah said about the first about trading up for the pick and going overboard with it and making all this content and doing all this stuff. And Joe goes, so let me get this straight. You want to sit here and complain about all this stuff, but you said there's an article out about you talking about it. And then PK also says that he wrote a second article about it, which is just hilarious to me that that got brought up. But it's a great article. You look back at all the trade ups and everything. And obviously the most famous one is one by Rand Carthon, but that's not his only one. And we'll talk about that on today's show. We're going to talk about that Big Jeff extension video, what it means, why you shouldn't panic, and just be fucking patient. It was so bizarre. We're also going to use, we're going back to the well to talk about Trevon Wesco versus Jeff Swain. And we are big Wesco supporters, but the contract numbers came out for Trevon Wesco, and it just shines a really bright, like one of those prison spotlights that are so bright that it follows the criminal around when they're trying to leave, on cartoons and stuff, on just how different these two regimes of Rand Carthon versus John Robinson are and how they navigate free agency. We're going to talk about that. We have a new segment that we're going to introduce. I'll drink to that. It's going to be sponsored by Bluegrass Beverages, obviously, our sponsor. Then we're going to be talking about our preferred Titans trade scenarios or draft scenarios. And I've done like a complete, I can't make up my mind.
And I'm struggling with it.
So last week I'm like, I don't think I want to draft Richardson, and I'm a little skeptical. Now I'm kind of like, maybe I'm a little bit the other way. So all kinds of different things that we're going to be talking about. But of course, I mentioned it earlier, Bluegrass Beverages, been around since the 70s. That's longer than me and Mike have been alive. Over in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Go and get go support a local business. Go get you some alcohol. Now listen, no drinking and driving, okay? And you have to be of age, and they'll make sure you're of age because they're going to check your ID. But go get you some alcohol. It's the weekend's coming around the corner. It's hump day. We're in the midpoint of the work week. You're probably
outside.
It's nice outside. You probably needed your alcohol on Monday because Mondays just always suck. I mean, Mondays are just the worst day ever. But go to Bluegrass, join the in crowd. Make sure you're tuning into a football show and Football and Other F Words because there's going to be some contests coming your way. So make sure to turn on those notifications. Mike, Big Jeff's agent put out the most bizarre fucking video that I have. Really, it's by far the weirdest video I've ever seen, I think, associated with the NFL from a business standpoint. Like, he thought this was going to do something, and for the most part, like, fans didn't really know what it meant. Like, I saw a lot of fans say, oh, it's going back. It's like Inception, right? Everybody's picking it apart or something. And is the dress blue or is it green? But at the end of the day, he's obviously saying the clock's ticking to the Titans. The Titans aren't on social media. Like, let's get real. What is this guy doing? What was your first instinct of this?
I mean, at first I was like, are they trying to announce something? Like, and a lot of people took it as like, oh, the extension is in the works, or they're about to announce the extension, and like, it just created a ton of confusion. I'm not really sure why it was put out, because like, there are much better ways to kind of put pressure on the Titans than to put out a Twitter video. I mean, I don't understand it all.
Yeah, it's pretty.
And I ultimately think it's meaningless. I don't think it means shit.
Right, and like, I don't get the point of it from a strategy point of view, from anything. I mean, we're talking about a guy that basically just put the world on notice that he has no fucking clue what an agent is really supposed to do. He's only been around as an NFLPA certified agent since 2019 and has successfully negotiated 0 contracts according to NFLPA.com. And this is the first big one. And apparently, I think he's a family friend, or he knows somebody, and then his other guys are some offensive linemen that I have never even heard of, and then Jeray Jenkins from LSU. It's like Jeff Simmons and then everybody else. And if I'm Jeff Simmons, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, well, it's a good thing he's not on Twitter, right? Because then he could have seen this ridiculous video. Maybe why he was told to delete Twitter. So he see himself get embarrassed. At least by association.
I guess the only thing I can think is maybe the agent just wanted to get his name out there a little bit more. That's really all it did.
But is that really? I mean, I know like we're in the age of TikTok and stuff, but it's like, is anybody looking at this thinking, man, he's going to really get the Titans over the barrel with this video? Like, and I guess there was also I think he knows who made the video, and maybe it was for them to show them, but like, it just didn't make sense. But it led people to talk about, of course, oh, does this mean he is signing, or when's he signing? This means clock's ticking, blah, 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 blah. First off, Jeffrey Simmons is under contract. The Titans have the leverage in this situation because right now he's only guaranteed like $10.9 or $10.5 million. And then once you start getting fines, that's going to slowly dwindle down, and fines happen because he is specifically under contract. So this led me to believe over at stackingtheinbox.com to do a little bit of research about Rand Carthon, who's director of player personnel for the San Francisco 49ers. I didn't really feel like going back to the Rams when he was director of pro personnel. I was just a little lazy. I had a lot on my plate this morning. So I just did San Francisco. So they've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 extensions from 2017 through 2022 season. Now, D Ford, Jimmy Ward, and Eric Armstead, so 3 of the 12, were kind of like Harold Landry extensions. They went right up to the free agency deadline. So those kind of don't count. Then the Jimmy Garoppolo, they did the extension when they traded for him in February. So that leaves like Daniel Kilgore, and then in February, who did a 3-year, $11 million deal. And then everybody else was in June and July. And in fact, Dre Greenlaw got extended in September of last year. So all the big ones were from June, July, August, September. And specifically about this is that we know that Rand Carthon, first off, is involved in these negotiations, involved in all these decisions, because that was his job title. But I get to bring back my favorite name, Parag Marathi, and his involvement in negotiations. And this is where Rand Carthon's learned everything. All this to say, it's not John Robinson thing to sign your free agents in July. It's almost like an NFL thing.
Yeah, I think it is kind of an NFL thing, but I do think it makes sense to do it in that time frame, and we've talked about it on the show before. Of like, it's a good kind of carrot to give the guys at the beginning of training camp and stuff like that as an example of, hey, you do everything right, like Big Jeff, you get a big payday, and it's just kind of to put it out there and let the guys celebrate with their teammates too. I think there's a lot of like advantages to that. Now, like, is that worth like holding up contract negotiations for? No. But I think that's part of why some of that stuff generally gets done around that time. They're actually in the building together at that time. There's a lot more conversations that can be had. It can kind of accelerate the process versus doing everything remotely or over the phone or whatever. So, I don't think everyone should just be waiting every single day, logging onto Twitter, hoping to see that Big Jeff got his extension. I think it's a decent chance it's going to be a 2 or 3 month thing.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, if it got done before the draft, I would be totally surprised. And if it really got done before June or July, whenever the mandatory stuff starts, I would be very surprised, because we've just seen it so many times before, not just here in Tennessee, but everywhere across the NFL. This is just how business is done in the NFL. Speaking of business being done in the NFL, there has been no greater, I think, spotlight shining moment on the difference of the approach that Rand Carthon is making in free agency and John Robinson is making than the contract numbers for Trevon Wesco, who hit the deal's out, and he signed a 1-year, $1.233 million deal with $152.5K signing bonus. Now, the reason I bring this up is because just last year, in fact, the last 2 years, Jeff Swaim's been paid more. He was paid $2.5 million in the 2021 season on a one-year deal, and last year he was paid $3.5 million. Utterly ridiculous. Like when I told you how much he got paid, or you pulled it up, you were just shocked. You were thinking it was more, but it's like bare minimum. And this is the sign I think that everybody needs to take into account, that things are going to be a little bit better free agency wise. I know it hasn't been exciting, but I think long term everything's going to be a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all been sensible deals and short-term deals and not a lot of risk on the Titan side of the table. So I think you got to like that. I mean, like you said, it's not been exciting, but I mean, frankly, the teams that are most exciting in free agency are usually the losers that are paying someone else's, fifth best offensive lineman like they're the first off, the best offensive lineman on their team, because a lot of times they are. But I think it's been good deals. And look, Wesco for $1 million basically is a steal. I mean, like, this guy's actually good at what he does. And I know people would get so mad. They get so mad when they look at a tight end stats and they just don't see many catches. Look, you
wouldn't believe how many people hate just Darnell Washington because I literally had someone tell me this week, Darnell Washington is not athletic.
What? He's extraordinarily athletic for a guy that goes 6'7", 270 or 280 or whatever the hell he is.
Yeah, this is ridiculous. This is crazy.
But yeah, I mean, I sort of people just literally want to build the entire team out of like 240-pound tight ends who can't block their way out of a wet paper sack, and still are going to expect the team to be able to like run the ball well and hold up in pass protection on these play action shot plays where you do have to leave tight ends in to block and things like that. Look, there's a role for him, and like everyone gets mad about. I've just had like an axe to grind on this whole thing for a whole week now, even since the signing. The whole, well, it's just another guy to put on the field in that Swaim role that's going to tell everyone whether we're running and passing. Every single team in the NFL has a guy that if you look at his splits, run versus pass, it'll skew wildly one way or another. And that's because there are specialist players. There are guys that are put on the field for special roles. And look, Wesco is going to be a first and second down only tight end. He is not going to be on the field for third downs unless it's third and short, like a yard or less. And Wesco is going to help this team. He's going to help this team in a lot of ways. And sure, maybe they will run the ball 60% of the time when he's in the game. That's fine. It doesn't, and then also it doesn't mean just because he's not a good pass catcher or a productive pass catcher doesn't mean that teams just don't cover him, right? Like if a team just says, okay, well, we're not going to cover him, we're going to use this extra guy to cover, Treylon Burks or whoever, then throw the ball to Wesco. It's not like he can't catch. It's not like if he's wide open, there's no one within 5 yards of him. Throw him the ball every play. I don't give a shit if he's good at it. It's not like he's got like greased up hands with two fingers on each hand or something like that. He's not going to catch the ball.
Okay.
He can catch the ball and run if he's wide open. So teams are not just going to leave him wide open.
Here you go. I'm going to help you make your argument for you, okay? About this pass blocking, or telegraphing what teams can do and everything, okay? This is going to help you. Okay, so remember, Jeff Swaim played a total of 703 snaps. Hold on, let's take off special teams here. Played a total of 578 snaps, okay? Yeah. So that is Jeff Swaim. So let's go to Kansas City's offense. Kansas City had Noah Gray, who had 714 total snaps played. Noah Gray, not someone that you really associate with anything other than, he's on the Kansas City Chiefs, made a few plays. 315 of those were for run blocking. Like, teams have guys that specifically run block. And Noah Gray, listen, he had 336 receiving yards and 1 touchdown. Like, yeah. It's okay to have a guy that's going to have really low yardage total, play a lot of snaps. He played the second most snaps out of tight end, and a guy that can block.
Like you cannot build an NFL wide receiver room, especially not if you're going to run the ball like the Titans do. You cannot build an NFL wide receiver room out of like Mike Gesicki and Evan Ingram and whoever else like you want to use is like, or Irv Smith or whoever, like guys that are like 240 pounds and cannot block. You cannot have just all those guys in the room because you will never be able to block anyone. Like you will never be able to run the football because your tight ends are just going to be overwhelmed on every play. So having a guy like Wesco serves a purpose. He can play his role. He doesn't have to be a star. He doesn't have to do a ton. He just has to go block, go be an extra offensive lineman who can occasionally catch a pass if a team does leave him wide open. So look, Wesco is a good addition because he's good at the role that he plays. And you have to have role players on a team because you can't have 53 superstars. That's just not the way it works. Okay. So let's all just be happy that they found a version of Jeff Swaim that's actually good at being what Jeff Swaim was supposed to be good at doing, which he was not good at doing.
Yeah.
And for way cheaper, for a third of the price.
A third of the price. That's ridiculous. It's just, at this point, Jeff Swaim had to have something over on John Robinson, right? Like, you're talking about a guy that got paid $6 million, 6.9 if you include the first year he was on the Titans, but 6.9 million or 5 point. Wait a minute. No, yeah, 6 point. I was right the first time. $6.9 million total by the Tennessee Titans over 3 years for really nothing special. Like, that's the thing. And now you're getting a guy for really so cheap that it just shines a light on, what the Tennessee Titans have done in the past versus where they're going in the future. And it's smart to leave yourselves out as a team on certain contracts, even though you want these guys to do well. I mean, not everybody's guaranteed to do well. Not every first round draft pick is guaranteed to be a hit, right? Like, nobody knows that more than Tennessee Titans fans. So
that's true.
It's the same thing for free
agents
agents
and bad teams, by the way,
yeah.
right? Like if you go look at the Chiefs' last few first round picks, you got Clyde Edwards-Helaire in there who can't even beat out Jerick McKinnon and all these other running backs that are signing off the street. Basically, Isaiah Pacheco comes in and steals his job. There are some misses for every team in the first round. It's not a 100% hit rate. And this is one of my pet peeves. We hype all these guys up in the draft, and rightfully so. Like, they've earned the opportunity to be talked about and everything like that. But about half these guys that we're all saying are like, man, this guy's a great prospect and everything. They're going to be terrible NFL players. Like half of them are. So we just have to prepare ourselves for that eventuality right now.
Yeah, it's all about mitigating the risk associated with the draft pick, right? Like, okay, so Caleb Farley didn't work out, even though it is year 3 and he wears number 3, and this is the year of Caleb Farley. I'm determined.
Caleb Farley comeback year.
It's Caleb Farley's comeback year. But at the end of the day, it was like the pick 29 or something like that.
Farley?
Wasn't he like 28?
22, I think.
Yeah, well, he's in the 20s. Those all 20s are all the same. Like Isaiah Wilson, he was really late. Now, the Isaiah Wilson is a bigger issue because all you've done is try to overcorrect that mistake. The Caleb Farley one's kind of like, it was the right choice at the time, but it didn't work out. It
was an understandable choice, right? Like it was like, okay, you're getting a guy that's like a top 10 pick if he was healthy at pick 22, so
but
you're
also
getting a little bit of a discount.
Also, they need to hire better medical staff. I'm pretty convinced, especially after the Saints have discovered so many injuries and illnesses with other players. I think the Titans need to step it up because one of the ones the Saints have diagnosed was Will Compton at one point. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Medical staff, I think it needs to be a little retooled. The doctors looking at these X-rays. Yeah. All right. News segment alert. Bluegrass Beverages is our sponsor. Hendersonville, Tennessee. They have a sister store in East Nashville or brother store. I don't know which one. They call the Sinkers calls Bluegrass a sister, but Bluegrass is first. So I don't understand how that all works. But they have a family. They have another business over there in East Nashville. It's been around since the 80s. Bluegrass has been around since the 70s. They're the older brother, I guess, or older sister. Either way, if you're in Hendersonville, which is a lovely little town that is just growing like crazy. If you're trying to go to the new, I think it's Texas Roadhouse that's over there. Yeah, it's the first off, it's like as big as a Walmart. It is massive. Secondly, it is always packed. It is insane how packed it is. But if you go in there afterwards, go get you a little wine, take home, have a little dessert, have a little wine, maybe some whiskey. Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Join the in crowd, get all kinds of perks and everything. So with new segment, we're calling it I'll Drink to That. And I got me a little whiskey. It's a little rye whiskey here. And I'm actually drinking it out of a glass that has a quote from Abraham Lincoln I'd like to share with you guys.
Oh.
Tell me what brand of whiskey that Grant drinks. I would like to send a barrel of it to my other generals. Abraham Lincoln. So
Nice.
I'll drink to that. But first, we're also going to tell everybody something positive, either whether it's football related, non-football related, but something positive that's happened over the week. And Mike, I'll let you go first.
All right. So I'm going to go with my something positive just being the young people that are getting out and like becoming involved in the political process, and regardless of where your politics
you've just told everybody, basically half our listeners have just turned off the podcast.
No, I think young people need to be involved in the political process and understand that they are going to have to be the ones that fix this, right? Because we have failed as a generation, and I mean maybe not our generation, but certainly the generations before us never really took any action and still are not taking any action. So at some point, somebody's going to have to fix this, and I hope it's our generation. But if it's not, it better be this younger generation who's unfortunately grown up with way too many tragedies in their life. So while that may be like a somber overall tone, I'm happy that
it really ended at the end.
That I'm happy that young people are becoming involved in the political process and using their voice to try to enact positive change for our world. So,
well, I'll drink to that. See,
I'll drink to that.
That's how this segment will work. All right, I'll drink to that. My positive thing is Ja Morant has overcome all of his mental obstacles and mental issues or emotional issues that was happening in the middle of the season, and he's back, baby. And he's coming back right at the right time. In playoffs, I got my Grind City shirt on, Memphis Grizzlies shirt. Had one on Memphis Tigers last week. But, props to him. He overcame weathered the storm, and he's coming back. And listen, this Grizzlies team, just like last year, is fun to watch. And I have no clue whether they're going to be put out in the first round or win the championship. But I know those are the only two things that can really happen for this team because they are just in people's heads. And I think the longer the series goes, the more in favor it is in the Memphis Grizzlies. So I'm all in. This is to Ja Morant. I'll drink to that.
I'll drink to that. As a Dallas Mavericks fan that's mourning the loss of that season, I'll join in on the Grizzlies.
Yeah, what happened? Who would have thought the Flat Earth Diva would derail your entire season?
It's not even his fault. It's not even Kyrie's fault at all. It's the fact that we don't play any defense at all, and Jason Kidd sucks as a coach, which we should have known. And yeah, it's not even Kyrie's fault. I think Kyrie's been okay.
Hey,
but I'll drink to that.
Jason Kidd sucks as a coach. I'll drink to that. All right. Now, listen, if you're listening to this in the car, please do not drink and drive.
No.
Let's get into the meat of the topic for today. And we are going to be talking about the preferred trade scenarios. And I laid out 4 with you. Now, you don't have to put these 4 in your order or anything. You can add more, whatever. I have like 4 preferred scenarios. And last week, I was such a coward in my thought process regarding Anthony Richardson. Just a coward. And look, I already got Bama Brad 1970. Don't like the politics of basketball. Well, my God, we wasted what, like 3 minutes of your life? Like, calm down, Bama Brad. I'm a Bama fan, and you're giving us a bad name. Look at this. Nick Saban signed football down in my corner. Calm down, Bama Brad 1970. All right. Okay. Sorry. Comments are popping up, so I just had to say something. So I was a coward last week about the NFL draft and about Anthony Richardson. And I get to a point where throughout the week, tweets pop up, right? And then you get context of certain stats, and then you look at stuff, and then it causes me at least to go back and watch film in a totally different light. Then I'm looking at stats. And I'm all in, baby. I'm all in. Number 1 overall preferred scenario for me is trade up for anybody but Will Levis. If it's Anthony Richardson, I'm okay. If it's CJ Stroud, I'm okay. If it's Bryce Young, I'm jubilant and fucking going crazy and gonna be like drunk for 3 days off bluegrass beverages. So what do you think about that scenario? Where does that rank?
It's I would probably draw the line at Young and Stroud. I don't necessarily want them to trade up for Richardson. While I do think
weren't you kind of like pro Richardson more than I was last week? So we flipped.
Well,
we'll never be on the same page on this.
I am still pro Richardson. I like him as a prospect. I like him a lot more than I like Will Levis, right? But because the upside is like otherworldly, like the potential of him getting some of his mechanic stuff fixed and just getting more comfortable as a quarterback playing at a high level. I think there is the upside that he hits big because he's a tremendous athlete. He's got a rocket arm. He's got everything that Josh Allen had coming out of Wyoming, but even more juice. Like he is like an even more athletic Josh Allen. As far as prospects coming out, not what Josh Allen is today, what they were as prospects. So I love the upside. I do think he's super risky. And to trade up to number 3, and as I wrote about for paulkarski.com, it's going to be expensive. I mean, you're talking about if you don't include if you don't want to include a future first, you're going to have to basically trade away you're going to have to trade away some sort of future asset. But you're going to have to move probably either your second or your third round pick, and then a 2024 first, and then plus something else, plus 11 to get into that third spot.
Wouldn't you just rather just trade away 3 first-round picks?
Maybe. I mean, that's
how I am, right? Or trade away a player with it, as long as it's not Jeffrey Simmons. I mean, like, I kind of and lessen the draft pick capital.
Here's my one issue with doing 3 first-round picks, especially if you're trading up for Richardson. I don't think that Richardson's going to be like really good right away. So I think if you're planning on starting him in 2023, you're probably going to be drafting pretty high, and you're probably going to end up giving away like a top 5 to 10 pick in that range somewhere if you're starting Richardson, because I think he's going to take his lumps early. I think that he can get there just like Josh Allen did. It took a little while, but he got there. I think he could get there, but I think you're going to take your lumps early. So I think it maybe depends a little bit, but if it's Young or Stroud, I'm all the way in. Let's go get him. Let's do what it takes to get the quarterback of the future in the boat. But I do think that is an attractive scenario for me. I can't quite get there with a trade all the way up to 3 for Richardson. Maybe like a smaller deal, or if he falls to 11, I'm totally in.
Let me help you. Let me see. Well, let me see if I can help you. So I put out a poll, and I don't know if you were in the chat when I gave out the answer to Wes last night, but I put out a poll about QB1, QB2, and they were very similar in stats. And because it had me thinking, a couple of days when I put out this poll, I just had this spark in my head. Is Anthony Richardson, who is the consensus quarterback 3 in this draft, is he better than the quarterback 3 in 2024? Okay. And in my opinion, I would think that it probably Quinn Ewers ends up being that. So Quinn is, whatever his last name is. It's a fucking stupid last name. Quinn Emu over there. He is probably the consensus quarterback 3, even though he's not like that right now, but I would say probably best bet. They have very similar stats. So you're just getting Quinn a year earlier, but you're going to be integrating him into an NFL offense. So let me ask you this. Would you rather have Anthony Richardson now or Quinn next year?
I'm going to try to remove my bias from this.
Yeah, remove the bias.
Fan. I think it's a valid question because, look, they're very different style quarterbacks, right? Because Richardson is huge, unbelievable athlete, huge arm, all that stuff. Ewers has a good arm. Like he's got, I would say, a plus arm as far as arm strength, but his real power, the real thing that makes him special is his accuracy and ability to put touch on the ball. Now there was times last year that didn't necessarily shine through because he was
Yeah,
playing
because
with
I was very surprised that Quinn's completion percentage was very close to what Anthony Richardson's was.
There's some context to that not a lot of people that don't closely follow Texas don't know because it wasn't put out there very publicly. So one, his wide receiver one, Xavier Worthy, and by far his best wide receiver on the team last year, was playing with a broken hand for most of the back half of the season. Two, and there were a lot of drops that he had that are associated with that. Two, Ewers, I believe, had a finger injury that came with like his finger getting slammed in a car door and his fingernail ended up falling off on his throwing hand during the leading up to the week that they played Oklahoma State. And he had this crazy game. I mean, for a guy that looked surgical against Alabama and Oklahoma and all these other teams leading up to that game against Oklahoma State, he went like 16 of 41 or something like that in that game and just couldn't hit the broadside of the barn. And we were all going like, what the hell is happening with him? Because he was missing easy throws. And then it turns out that there's some sort of injury that was associated with his throwing
what
hand
you're kind of exposing here is that he's an idiot and a wuss because first off, he doesn't know how to keep his hands clear of car doors. And B, he can't he lost a fingernail and he suddenly can't throw the fucking football anymore.
Well, on your throwing hand, that is tough.
Okay.
That is tough. But yeah, I mean, I think it's, I think there's some context with the completion percentage stuff because I do think he is an accurate thrower when his, mechanics are right and he's, healthy and he's got, receivers that can catch the ball. So I think you will see Ewers have a much better statistical season this year than what we saw out of Richardson. And I do wonder, because Richardson had the 2021 season where he was kind of like splitting time with that other quarterback. What was his name? I can't even remember.
Oh, Emory Hunt, right?
Emory, yeah. Or no, yeah. Was it
Emory something, right? No, Kyle Trask.
No, it was something Emory. Emory, it was either Emory something or something Emory. Yeah.
Yeah, Emory. What a horrible name, by the way. Don't name your kids Emory.
Yeah.
Stupid name.
So, but he was kind of splitting time with Emory. And if you look at like the games played, I think Ewers and him probably played about the same amount of snaps. Like Ewers is 2022 versus Richardson's 2021 because Ewers missed that time with the shoulder injury. And I think that's also something like Ewers has had his fair share of injuries, like even going back to high school now. I think that'll ding his stock a little bit. So, I don't know. It's a very tough
like
question.
A John Robinson special, right there.
Emory Jones. That's what it was.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, isn't that the proper way to contextualize? I feel like Anthony Richardson is like, because if you don't draft Anthony Richardson and you run it back with Tannehill, Henry, and obviously a better offensive core, then you are basically going to play yourself out of even further to get quarterback 1 or 2. Because right now you're in the hunt technically for quarterback 1 and 2. Because if you go to 3 and the Texans do something stupid, you could technically get quarterback 2, right?
Or just if you're one of your quarterbacks, I think the way that
maybe Anthony Richardson's number 1, right?
Right. I think teams are going to have these guys stacked very differently. I know, like pretty much everyone consensus wise, as far as like fans and media, seem to go Young, Stroud, Richardson, Levis. I think it's going to be all jumbled between those top 4. I think teams' boards are going to have different guys on top, and I think there's a very real possibility that you could end up with your quarterback 1 or quarterback 2 at number 3 in this year's class, because there's not a Trevor Lawrence type prospect this year that is like very clearly the top dog.
Because very likely you'll be out of that next year. I mean, like you'll be out of that without having to give up probably more to get a Drake May or Caleb Williams, which are the consensus 1 and 2. You may be able to get a Bryce Young, CJ Stroud's 3, but you have to be comfortable with an Anthony Richardson as well. Like, I mean, that's the thing. So. And I feel like that's the proper way to kind of contextualize if you are looking for the quarterback of the future and you have enough conviction, like if it's Bryce Young at the very top, just for an example, CJ Stroud, and then like at number 2, and then like Anthony Richardson's like 2B to CJ Stroud, and then Will Levis is like 20. Then obviously you would think that, okay, well, if you're that team, you would think that I can be okay with CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson because I have them higher than I do the quarterbacks next year, and the outlook of my team is very positive for next year. I want to get into, though, a little bit of discussion that's been floating around, and Kenneth Krall put it up before he had to leave, around this narrative out there that Hooker should be taken over Richardson, and Hooker is the better prospect. And I've come around on this as well, because last week I said, okay, well, he's pretty a safe guy, right? Like, he's very safe. I believe in him. But the 25-year-olds that have been, because I thought he had a very high floor.
Yeah.
I don't know if his floor is as high as what we want to give him credit for, based on age, injury, and the scheme he's coming from. But Kenneth Krall brings up, he says, I got to log off, but for people saying Hooker over Richardson, that's lunacy. Just think about if Richardson was in Coach Josh's offense. I like to call him Coach Josh.
Pastor
offense
Jones.
last year, and Hooker was in Florida. Like, come on, man. And this ties into what Nate Tice has been talking about on Twitter. And he's been talking about how completion percentages and heat maps tell the story as a great example of how every quarterback's completion percentage is built different. And then it leads into this big, long thing. But essentially, people are agreeing of, I guess, intellectual, analytical minds, which is very important if you're going to be the Tennessee Titans going forward and you are pro analytics. You actually have to listen and pay attention to the analytics, right? And for specifically Anthony Richardson, it's hard to have a consistently great completion percentage when it's a go big or go home offense without elite surrounding talent. And Florida apparently rarely, we're talking like really super rare, bottom of the barrel, quarterback prospects rate of attempts from 1 to 10 air yards. So this is like your RPOs, your screens, your quick game passing, bottom of all the prospects by a wide margin. So this is a Florida offense that is pro style and what it asks its quarterback to do in pre-snap, but it is like chuck it and fuck it. The rest once the ball snapped, and that has hurt, I feel like, Anthony Richardson's completion percentage. So completion percentage is another thing that people have been talking about. But all this to say, it's like when you look at his stats and you look at just from a pure perspective, 8 completions in one game, 240 yards out of 8 completions. That is ridiculous. And I know there's only 10 attempts tied to that, but let's take that into context. He threw the ball 10 times and still threw for 240 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I know everybody wants to shit on the Florida State game. All he did was complete 9 completions. Now, remember, the context of what I just talked about is how the offenses ran. 9 completions for 198 yards. And 3 touchdowns out of 9. This kid is something special. And I really feel like that is what is kind of like taken into account when I went back and looked at the film after I read that Nate Tice thread. Going back and looking at the film, the decisions that he made when he threw short makes sense, and they were really good. He just wasn't asked to do that because that's really not – Florida kind of knew going in this was kind of like a transition year. They knew Anthony Richardson was likely going to enter the NFL draft. They just were kind of in like – I feel like in neutral the whole way. And I just kind of look at it and I go, man, they kind of really did him a disservice. The talent is just so there. And I still think he should have gone back for one more year, and we'd be talking about Anthony Richardson, consensus number 1 quarterback next year with Drake May. And him and Caleb Williams would all be fighting it out because I think another year in an offense would have done him some good, and that's why he's inexperienced, not raw or project.
And I think one other point to kind of go along with your Richardson thing there, because it is true, like completion percentage is a useful stat, but it can certainly be skewed by what kind of throws you're asked to make. Like, a screen merchant is going to have a much inflated completion percentage, even if he's not a more accurate thrower of the football versus a guy who's
and it
airing it
leads
out,
to
right?
wide receivers too, right? Like if you look at the
That's
reception percentage or contested catch percentage with Quentin Johnston, a lot of that is just Max Duggan sucking.
well, and I also think it's kind of correlated both ways, right?
Right.
Because Timo Reese had a good tweet from PFF earlier this week regarding Tua, but I think it applies to Richardson too. The Florida receivers were terrible last year, absolutely awful, drops all over the place. But even if you're not talking about specifically drops, there are there are correlations to how good your receivers are to how accurate you appear to be as a passer. Tua's accuracy on throws 10 plus yards downfield by year. So when he was at Alabama, 51.5%. That was when he was throwing to, Waddle and Devontae Smith and Henry Ruggs and, all these other just studs out there, right? Then he goes to the pros in Miami, had nobody his
It was
first
like
year.
Preston Williams, who was only playing like a couple of games.
Devontae Parker and nobody. He had no help. It drops from 51.5% to 33.8%. Then they go get Waddle, which helps a little bit, brings them up to 39.8% the next year. And then in 2022, they add Tyreek Hill, and he's back up at 51.5%.
And they do the same thing with Joe Burrow going from LSU over then 1 year and then Jamar Chase.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So I think Richardson has been hurt by a bad supporting cast, and you could probably say the same about Stroud being helped by a strong supporting cast, because Stroud has basically played with 4 first-round wide receivers the last 2 years.
Kind of like what I feel like, because the S2, we know the rumors are circulating. While we can't give out scores or anything because that violates stuff, we know that CJ Stroud has not tested as high as his contemporaries in this other class. That's what I heard from someone else, not associated with the S2 project, through a little bit of back channeling and stuff, which makes you wonder how much of his reaction and accuracy and everything is because of the talent around him. And if you get a guy like CJ Stroud, which I still would take the risk for CJ Stroud this year, if you don't build around him quick enough, how much? Because Justin Fields is a good example. If you don't build around Justin Fields quick enough, how are you going to be able to do that with CJ Stroud? And luckily, the Titans have 150 million whatever in cap space next year, which is crazy. But
which all goes back to, remember what Ryan Tannehill looked like when he had AJ Brown and Corey Davis? Maybe the Titans should just take Jackson Smith and Jigba at 11 and move on.
Well, that's a good transition, because that's my number 2. So where was the trade up for you?
It was number 1. If they can get their quarterback of the future, it's number 1 for me.
Okay, so Jackson Smith and Jigba, who once again, I at one point was like, man, I don't know if the value is there and all this stuff. Well, stackingitinbox.com, I've compiled all kinds of freaking data, because apparently I'm just a data addict and nerd at this point. And I look at his season last year, because, I had to give them a good full season to compare him to the other wide receivers, right? I mean, using last year's stats ain't going to give anybody any clear information. So I used the prior year season. Holy crap, is this guy ridiculous? He's so fucking good. And not only is he good by the data, he's good by, here are the people who've said that Jackson Smith-Njigba is better than Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Brian Hartline, CJ Stroud. And not only that, I believe it's Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson ended up saying he's the best wide receiver they've ever played with.
And here's the other thing, because a lot of people will say, well, they're just hyping up their guy to try to get him drafted higher. Both Olave and Garrett Wilson were quoted before Jackson Smith-Njigba even had his breakout year, before those guys were even drafted, as saying he is I think Garrett Wilson's quote was, he is the most natural athlete I've ever seen, and he is the best wide receiver I've ever been on a field with. And by the way, Garrett Wilson was a 5-star prospect. Jackson Smith-Njigba is also a 5-star prospect, but that was before they really even had their breakout seasons. Garrett Wilson was saying this stuff. This guy is special. And if the team lets one hamstring injury scare them off of taking them easily the most talented wide receiver in this draft class, shame on them. Forever shame on any team that allows that hamstring injury to get in the way of them getting the best wide. Because let me tell you, I don't care if Quentin Johnston's hamstrings are made out of fucking steel. He's not going to be as good a receiver as Jackson Smith-Njigba.
Stay away from that jet fuel.
True. Yeah, keep him away from that. It'll melt it.
Listen, I'm with you now. I was just so hesitant because I'm like, man, I just don't know. I mean, his testing wasn't great. Then his testing started to creep up at his pro day. And I know that they have like performance enhancing field turf down at Ohio State, is what I was told.
They're actually running on those moving sidewalks at the airport.
Yeah. Apparently that's what the Ohio State field is made off of, the turf. But I think you really got to go look at the 2021 season. You just have to, because it is a phenomenal look at what a wide receiver, what kind of wide receiver he is. I mean, he's insane. And at the end of the day, at 11, he's the only guy at 11 that's a wide receiver that I'm in on. And he's barely,
by far.
Yeah, he barely in the physical department, in height, weight, arms, hands, and wingspan. He's just barely underneath the norm for the Tennessee Titans under John Robinson, for Rand Carthon's 49ers, and what Les Snead also looks for with the Rams. But everything else, I mean, you're talking about a guy that in 2021, he had a contested catch percentage of 90%.
That's insane.
Yards per route run, 4.01.
Also insane.
He ran 4.26 yards per route run versus man cover. So this is versus press. Ugh. His yards after catch were 790 yards in 2021. That's a 8.3 yards after catch per reception, and he forced 19 missed tackles. Now, let me put that into context real quick. Those yards after catch and those 19 missed tackles forced came behind the 10-yard line. His average depth of target was 9.3. So he was causing people to miss, forcing people to miss at a much harder, difficult place to do that. So in my mind, and he's doing all this with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave still with the team. In my mind, your clear number one is Jackson Smith-Njigba. And it's a travesty if he even falls to 11 at this point, because you've seen what Justin Jefferson has done. You've seen what CeeDee Lamb has done. You've seen what these guys have done in the past. And he is the clear number one wide receiver by a mile, in my opinion.
100% agree with you. And look, people keep saying, well, he was on the field with all this talent at Ohio State. He outperformed all the other talent. He was their leading receiver that year. It's not, if teams were sending players away from Jackson Smith-Njigba to go help on Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, they were making a huge mistake because they were leaving their best receiver wide open. And I'm also totally out on this whole idea that he can only play in the slot. Look, this guy's 6'1", almost 200 pounds, very normal size receiver. He's not like one of these little, mini guys out here that are littered.
He's the legit same height as AJ Brown.
Yes, he is the exact same height as AJ Brown. He's obviously not as thick as AJ Brown, but he's about the same speed as AJ Brown. He's much quicker than AJ Brown from a in and out of your break standpoint, from a 3-cone and short shuttle time standpoint. He is elite. This guy is not going to have a problem getting off press coverage. I don't know that you necessarily want him to play the X all the time, but guess what? You already have an X in Treylon Burks. You can play this guy at the Z. You could play him in the slot. The reason Ohio State put him in the slot is because it's easier to get your best player the ball when they're in the slot in college. It's just, there's more room to operate. It's an easier throw. You're not asking your quarterback to throw outside the numbers all the time. It is easier to get that guy the ball, which is exactly the same reason that AJ Brown played most of his snaps in the slot in college, why Justin Jefferson played almost all of his snaps in the slot in college. This guy is on the same level as them from a talent standpoint, in my opinion. And to me, is by far the best option at 11 at this point. And I at one point was toggling back and forth between him and Paris Johnson Jr., who I still love. I still love Paris Johnson Jr. But to me, the more I think about it, the more I think a wide receiver, you just have to have an elite one at this point, especially, I mean, because it's going to make any quarterback look better. And even if you have a young quarterback, if you have Ryan Tannehill, like whoever you have a quarterback, Jackson Smith-Njigba will make them look a lot better. It will increase their performance. And we've seen Ryan Tannehill put together a top 5, top 10 offense with really good receivers around him. Let's see if he can do that again. That's probably their best path forward to being really good again fast, is either one, they hit on like a unicorn quarterback with Bryce Young or CJ Stroud or whoever, or Anthony Richardson, or they get really good receivers and put them back around Ryan Tannehill and kind of are able to recreate that cast that he had in 2020 and 2019, except with a good defense this time. And then that's the team that goes further. So to me, if you want to go for it this year, Jackson Smith-Njigba was the pick, and it's not even close. Like, it is not even close to me. So I am all in. And as far as like comps, I know someone, Josh Grantham in the chat was asking for comps. I think CeeDee Lamb is a really good comp for him from a size standpoint, speed standpoint, usage standpoint, all that stuff. But I just see flashes of Justin Jefferson. And look, Justin Jefferson ran a little bit faster. I think he was like 4.43 or somewhere around there. I think Njigba's official time from the pro day ended up being 4.48. So he's maybe not quite as fast, but from a body control standpoint, from a, in and out of his breaks, quickness standpoint, from a contested catchability standpoint, I think he's all over Justin Jefferson on all of those categories. So whether, 5/100ths of a second of 40 time is worth, that much of a difference, I just don't believe it. I think 40 time is the most overrated thing in the NFL in most cases. I mean, obviously they're fun to see when you see the blazing fast times.
Yeah,
and stuff like
I'm
that, but
looking at it. I've been looking at a lot of data. Like I've been saying, stackingtheinbox.com for $1 a month. 10-yard split, 20-yard split's more important to me now than a 40-yard.
I agree with that. And look, I mean, it's not like he ran a disqualifying 40 time either, right? Like 4.48 is fine. Even if you say it's on the high end of the ranges that were out there, that was 4.52, that's fine. That's fine. Like AJ Brown ran 4.49. I mean, that is a perfectly fine time. We're talking about like that's the difference between like those guys over 40 yards of space. Like that's just not enough difference to material affect his ability to be an awesome receiver, which is what he is. He is an awesome wide receiver. He would immediately make this team better. And I would be so fired up about Jackson Smith-Njigba.
You are fired up, baby. And I love it.
I'm so excited. I
am excited too, because if you're not drafting up to quarterback, then like I said, JSN at number 11 is the clear. And listen, let me ask you something. Where would you be comfortable trading up to secure JSN? Or like if you're getting the feeling a little shaky that another NFL team is going to jump in front of you to take JSN, because I think he's that good that a team maybe like at number 15 could trade up in front of you, because isn't that what it's what they did for Chris Olave, right? I mean, like if someone traded up for one of those wide receivers. Where in the NFL draft do you think is a good, safe place where you're getting value and you're trading up for a wide receiver?
See, I'm looking at the list here. So I could see the Lions maybe being interested in. I mean, they're probably going to go corner, right? They're probably going to go corner. I can't see him going to
Everybody
the
keeps saying they're going to go corner, and I'm thinking, okay. And then we're kind of getting a different topic here. They signed two of them. They signed Emmanuel Mosley. They signed
Gardner Johnson.
But they signed another one on top of that, didn't they? I think they signed three, actually.
Yeah, they might have. And they've still got Okudah there, who I think showed some progress last year.
Yes.
So maybe I think that's probably the highest I could see him going would be 6. I don't know what it would cost to trade up to 6, but I might be tempted to do it if Carthon had a credible hunch or information that there was a team that was moving up to go get Jackson Smith-Njigba ahead of them. I would be comfortable with jumping up probably as high as 6.
Cameron Sutton.
And Sutton's a good player too. So they basically signed a whole new starting corner set. So maybe they don't have to go get. Although I think most of those guys were 1-year deals too, if I remember correctly. I know Gardner Johnson was. I can't remember on the. I think Mosley was too, but either way, the Lions are kind of a wild card. I could see them going several different ways there, but Atlanta's not going to take a receiver, I don't think. Chicago's probably
I don't
not
know. I
taking a
think you
receiver.
may. Yeah, they probably
Philly's
wouldn't.
probably not.
But could you see a scenario where Arthur Smith's like, well, there's no real value because they solved a lot. They had a really good free agency.
They did.
Either
yeah.
way, I mean, I think if you where are you okay? What's the highest? Let's just say that. What's
6.
the highest you'd go? 6.
I'd go up to 6 for him.
Yeah, I think I'd be right there with you. I think
mean,
you'd
that's
have to jump in
where-
front of some of those guys.
That's where Jamar Chase went, right? Right around 6. I know that's
6 or
like
5, I think.
But I think Jackson Smith and Jacobs on that level as a prospect. I think he's right there. You know, that's the kind of player I think he is.
Okay, so we're going. We both agree. Trade up is number 1 for the guy. If you feel the conviction, trade up. Not out of desperation, obviously. Trade up or get JSN no matter what at number 2.
Yeah.
And I think there's a big wide gap between those two and what the next one I'm going to talk about. And I have been all on board about Paris Johnson Jr. being the best pick at number 11. And now I'm like, okay, I'll be happy as long as JSN is off the board and the trade up didn't work out. But it's kind of like you're it sounds weird because you're settling for a really high upside elite player.
Yeah.
But it feels very much like you're settling now at this point.
I mean, I do think Paris Johnson Jr. is going to be a franchise left tackle for somebody. I think he's going to be a guy that you plug into the starting lineup for the next 10 to 15 years, and you're really happy with what you've got right there. So I would not feel bad about that by any means. I'd be happy about it. I wouldn't probably be as fired up as I would be about Jackson Smith and Jigba, partially because, hey, wide receivers are a little bit more fun. But I do think that would be a sensible pick, especially if some of the other options are off the board.
Would that be your number 3 option as well?
Part of me actually feels like if I was going to go tackle, I might want to trade down a little bit.
You see, my trade back is number 4, so your trade back is probably number 3.
Yeah, I'd probably rather trade down because even if that meant I missed on Paris Johnson Jr. and Skoronski, I'd be okay with landing a Broderick Jones or an Anton Harrison or someone of that ilk, in the middle part of the first round, especially if, and I don't know what it would take, how far back they'd have to move to get somebody else's 2024 first. But if I could get a 2024 first and move back, 10 spots or so, and still get, like a Broderick Johnson or Anton Harrison, I'd feel pretty good about that, honestly, because then you do have, your what you would think would be your left tackle of the future on board. You could move Dillard to guard or whatever. But you've got a future there settled, and you've got the ammo to either have like another lottery ticket in case that team suffers an injury and bottoms out and maybe ends up with like a top 5 pick in next year's draft, or you've got trade capital that you could kind of trump other teams trying to trade up to get, Caleb Williams or Drake May or Quinn Ewers or whoever it is that ends up being, the kind of top quarterback that's attainable in next year's class. So I think I think trade back would kind of be my third option at this point.
Yeah, I think I want to go for the sure thing. Like, I think at that point, my 2 big ones are kind of risky, right? Not really JSN at 11, but if I'm going to say I would trade up for JSN, that's a pretty big risk. So, and obviously trade up for a quarterback is. So I'm like, okay, if those are gone off the board, I'd rather have Paris Johnson Jr. than any other player, unless, I think I'm just going to say it. Yeah, I think Paris Johnson Jr. better than any other player that would be available. That includes Christian Gonzalez, includes Joey Porter, includes Jalen Carter, includes all those guys. Includes all, except for Will Anderson, which I don't think is going to be available. That includes everybody that you normally see in the top 10. I would rather have Paris Johnson Jr. And then I think I would like to trade back. If Paris Johnson Jr. is not there, and he's already been drafted, and Peter Skoronski's there, I would rather trade back than draft Peter Skoronski because I'm not drafting a guard at number 11. I would rather let someone else come up and draft him and then take the draft capital and build the build the team that way. Because I am with you. Building the team through the draft seems to be the for now strategy and the correct strategy. If I'm not if I am to be so bold as to say that I really like the late day 2, day 3 picks more than like the day 1 picks, as far as
from a value
from the
standpoint.
value standpoint.
Yeah.
I just really love them.
And I will say, we've talked about this a little bit as far as the state of the roster and how many like really 25 and under cornerstone pieces this team has right now. It's super low. Like it might be one, like like Jeffrey Simmons, and that's it. They need to like really get a infusion of young talent. And this season, I kind of feel like, the way they've approached free agency, I think they kind of know that this season is kind of a reset year for them. And to me, like if you could just get a bunch of young guys in, get them some playing time, get them some opportunity, let them grow, and then be ready with like a war chest of cap space and some more picks in 2024 to really like throw some gasoline on this build. I think that's kind of not a bad play, honestly, for where they are. Because I still, even though like the Jackson Smith and Jigba thing kind of gets me fired up for like the 2019-2020 Titans offense coming back a little bit. I could see it. I could see them being very competitive if they were to manage to land him, and he is everything that I think he is. I still think they're probably not. It's not a Super Bowl team, right? Like they're not one player away from being a Super Bowl team right now.
Right.
So I think even if they're competitive, you're still playing to like continue your build into 2024. Like this is a ground laying off season for Rand Carthon, and I think it's setting them up for future success more than it is for immediate like day 1 returns, even though they could be better this year. We'll see.
Okay. We agree on pretty much everything. Is there another scenario you want to throw out here that you're high on? Because if there's not, I do have a subject for you that I want to talk about.
There's probably not another scenario that I'm super high on. I want to. They need to get an offensive piece like that. That's really what it comes down to.
What do you say to the people? I don't know if they're in your mentions like they are in mine saying this, but when I throw up a mock draft, which is, and I say, obviously, it's 100% accurate. All the players are going to be there, blah, blah, blah.
Of course.
But I trade up for Anthony Richardson. I trade away 3 first-round picks only. You can trade away just 2 first-round picks for Anthony Richardson this year's and next year's in the PFF draft simulator, but I don't think that's very realistic. That'd be great, but I don't think it's very realistic. So I do that.
The realistic path is the 49ers.
Right, 3. At least 3.
Yeah.
We know there's 2 things about that I want to harp on real quick, and I wish I would have fucking did this at the beginning of the show. I may clip this off. So here's what we're going to do. When I do that, people say, there's no way Rand Carthon would ever do that. Rand Carthon, first off, has been a part of 2 regimes that have traded up for quarterbacks. He was there when they traded up for Jared Goff. He was there when they traded up for Trey Lance. Varying degrees of success, but he's been there for both. There's a good chance that all this smoke surrounding trade-ups is true. That is followed up with, if he trades for Anthony Richardson, he might as well pack up his office now. What do you think about that? Those 2 statements.
It's crazy. I mean, I guarantee you there were Bills fans saying that about, trading up to draft Josh Allen. And I mean, the funny thing is, I think actually the Bills social media did a thing on it a couple years ago, maybe when Josh Allen just started to break out. They had Josh Allen read some of the mean tweets that people replied to the Bills official account selection, like when they announced the selection of Josh Allen, and like the tweets under, like it is still a treasure trove. Like if you go back and you could find that tweet, it is a treasure trove of horrendously cold takes from Bills fans who were like, I'm selling my season tickets. I'm done. This franchise is never going to be good. And look, Josh Allen still hasn't won a Super Bowl or really anything significant, so we'll see if he gets there. But he's turned out to be really good as a quarterback, right? So I think people always overestimate how much they really know, and what the future is going to hold for these guys. And we're still talking about, and especially in Richardson's case, talking about a guy that's 20 right now. He's not even 21 years old. He's not even old enough to go to Bluegrass Beverages and buy anything. And we're already saying we know what his whole future is as a professional athlete. I mean, the guy
He turns 21 in May, by the way.
Okay, yeah, so it's coming up. Maybe when he comes to visit the Titans, he can go by there. But he is a work in progress, no doubt about that. But he is also a freakish athlete, and I posted the tweet about the previous, RAS guy quarterbacks that had reached or it reached the perfect 10.0 plateau, and it was Vinny Testaverde. It was Dante Culpepper. It was God, I'm blanking on who the other one was. Was it Cam Newton?
Yeah, it's Cam Newton. I was about to say
Cam Newton. And then a guy named was it Brooke Bollinger? I might be screwing his name up, but a Nebraska quarterback who tragically died in a plane crash before the draft. So 3 out of the 3 that actually got to experience their NFL career all ended up being Pro Bowl level players. So that's not to say that Anthony Richardson for sure is going to be a Pro Bowl level player, but he has a special skill set. And I think you can build an offense around him, right? Like, think about what the Ravens did with Lamar Jackson. And not to say that this is the only way you could do it with Richardson, but the Ravens took Lamar Jackson at the very end of the first round. And when they got him, they had a good plan in place to use his skill set, let him come along as a passer, and use his special skill set as a runner to wreak havoc on the NFL. And it worked tremendously. And I think that you could do that with Richardson. Like, he's such a special athlete that there has got to be a way to use him effectively to create a problematic offenses for defenses to have to handle. And whether that means he's like Patrick Mahomes, maybe he's never Patrick Mahomes. I don't know. But I think you could build something really special with him because of how freakish he is as an athlete and the fact that he does have some quarterback skill set. Like, right, he is not as just raw and undeveloped as some people make him out to be as a quarterback. Like, from a processing standpoint, from a feeling his way through a pocket standpoint, like I think the people that drive me really crazy, honestly, in the mentions about Richardson are that he's just Malik Willis 2.0, which is just so misguided on so many levels. Richardson is a way better athlete than Malik Willis.
Way better
quarterback in every way than Malik Willis was coming out of Liberty. So, but I think people are selling him way short of what he actually is. Now, like, is he
because of UT fans? I mean, it's definitely UT fans.
That's part of it too. I mean, and like, it's funny because we get all these fan bases in our mentions because, the Titans have a lot of these fan bases intermixed with the Titans fans. But it's so funny that, I mean, the Hendon Hooker love, and then, you get, like, anytime I tweet about Will Levis, I get some Kentucky fans coming into my mentions talking about how much I hate him.
I get called a UT fan from Kentucky. Well, this guy's a UT fan. Just because I'm a Tennessee Titans fan, I'm barely UT. And I'm like, no, bro. I mean, I guess you don't listen to the podcast, but I am the furthest thing from a UT fan. I'm an avid UT hater.
Yes.
I did respect them this past football season because I thought they were going to be pretty good. But I'm an objective observer of the other SEC teams outside of Auburn, who will always be trash and a heap of pile of garbage. I got one last thing I want to say about what's been in my mentions. And this has also driven me insane. How can you draft a quarterback and trade up for a quarterback? You'll never be able to fix the offensive line if you trade away all those first-round picks. What? They have $100 and something million next year. If they need to really desperately fix the offensive line, which I will say this, I'm going to go out on a limb. However this offensive line looks outside of injuries, if the starting 5 is Andre Dillard plus a rookie, and you can flip them around however you want to, Aaron Brewer, Daniel Brunskill, and Nicholas Petit-Ferrer is your starting five, that is a better starting five than almost every game they had last year.
Every game except for the first one, right?
Every game except for the first one, and it may end up being better than the first one. We don't know, but I mean, like if I'm projecting it, I'm just gonna say every one but the first one. However, trading away the 3 first-round picks, they have fixed the offensive line for the most part. Whether they believe in Jamarco, they believe they fixed enough of the offensive line.
Yeah, I think
if you are skeptical, that's fine.
I think they feel better. I think they feel like Andre Dillard is going to be a guy, and I think we'll see.
Yeah,
but I think they feel like that. Yeah.
But that first-round pick this year doesn't have to be offensive line. We've already talked about that numerous times on this podcast. Next year, guess what? It still doesn't have to be offensive line. Like, quit pigeonholing the teams and their choices in the draft. It's not the only way to fix the offensive line. And in fact, probably the best way is to find younger guys in free agency they can maybe slightly pay a little bit more. But next year they can solve a lot of issues next year if they forego those issues in the draft. And there's still quality guys out there in free agency. There's still Dalton Risner still out there. I mean, there's other guys.
Yeah, and I would also add that if the quarterback is the guy, like if you get the quarterback and he turns out to be the guy that you thought he was, that you moved up to get, the franchise quarterback, you're never going to worry about those picks that you gave up. Because look, I mean, when the Bengals went and got Joe Burrow, what did their offensive line look like? What does their
offensive line still look like?
Yeah. It didn't matter because they got the guy, and that is all that matters. The same goes for Josh Allen. Like, go look at those Bills teams when Josh Allen landed there, and even his first couple years and whatnot before they got Diggs and kind of rebuilt that line. They were awful. And the same goes for Justin Herbert with the Chargers. I mean, yeah, they had Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, but they had a terrible offensive line, like one of the worst in the league. So spare me this idea that, like, you have to wait until the team is perfect to draft your quarterback. Otherwise, you're going to ruin them. That's just not true. It's just not. And history has proven it time and time again that if you go get the guy and the guy is the guy, then it doesn't matter how bad the team is around him.
Josh Allen's second year. Can you tell me his leading receiver with 1,060 yards?
I know the leading receiver.
Second year.
Okay. No, okay, so the year before he got there, the leading receiver was Charles Clay. I remember that with like 500 something yards. It was pitiful. So it would have had to been, what year was that?
2019.
2019.
I'll give you the first one too when it comes up.
Is it who was on the Bills? I can't even remember.
What a fucking look. Okay, here's what Josh Allen had his rookie season. Zay Jones. This is his rookie year, 2018.
I was about to say
that's not 2019. This is 2018. Okay. Zay Jones, 652 yards. Robert Foster, 541 yards, and Kelvin Benjamin, 354 yards, were his top three receiving yards. Top three receiving yards were those three guys. His rookie year. Okay? Now you go into his second year, and you know what they did? Absolutely fucking nothing, it feels like. Because here's their guys. John Brown was the leading receiver with 1,060 yards. John fucking Brown, former Raven and deep ball threat. Then it's Cole Beasley with 778. Okay, so 778. Then it goes all the way down to 388 yards. So the third leading receiver was Dawson Knox with 388 receiving yards.
Yeah.
First 2 years. I know that people are down on the Titans pass catchers, but I have to think that in year 2 of Anthony Richardson or CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, it's going to be better than that.
Yeah, I would have to say. Yeah, and it has been proven, I think, at this point that you're not going to break a quarterback by having a bad, at least not a good quarterback. I just don't, at least not one that's got any sort of mental toughness at all to him. because we've seen too many guys dumped into bad situations that have pulled the team out of a bad situation. It doesn't have to be perfect. Don't spend your whole time trying to get your offense perfect minus the quarterback before you.
By the
try to
time you
draft
get it
one.
perfect and healthy, guess what? People are going to be leaving in free agency.
Yeah, they're all going to get expensive. You won't be able to afford them, like the whole 9 yards. So, yeah,
Get the guy that can make everyone around him better. Is that
it's
Anthony Richardson? We'll see.
yeah.
But if they feel that it's Anthony Richardson, then that should give you a lot of faith, right?
And also, I really don't think that it's cut and dry, that it's 100% just going to be Stroud Young in some order 1-2. I just don't. Like, Peter
I'm with
King
you.
even floated the idea that the Texans could go defense.
We floated that out on our podcast before them. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I wasn't going to bring it up, but you betrayed me in your article. I literally am the first one that tweeted out the move the sticks draft pick trade up. And then everybody, like 5 days later, Buck writes an article, which is like, it's a good article if you want to scroll all the way to the bottom after he regurgitates what Daniel Jeremiah said, regurgitates some stats. And then at the very bottom, which is something that everybody's missing, he says, we have confirmed through our own sources that they have inquired about trading up. But you don't get that until you have to go through like 10 fucking paragraphs of bullshit. And nobody wants to give me credit. That was the first one I get.
I actually was trying to give you credit. I went to your page. I scrolled all the way down.
We were literally texting yesterday. If you would have said, "Hey,
I had already written it before then." I had already written it before.
Whatever. It's not like you don't have my cell phone number. But anyway, I don't know where I was going. Because we were talking about the Texans not taking it. And I have said on numerous shows that I kind of get the feeling that they may not. And I really don't think the Colts will. But we'll see. But I think there is a better than average possibility, like you're saying, that the Texans may not draft a quarterback.
Yeah. Or they might not draft the quarterback we think they're going to draft. Like,
I think they're going to trade out of the pick.
I think both these teams are kind of, I mean, they could go multiple different ways. I just don't see it as, 100% stamped today that it's Stroud and Young 1-2 in some order. I'm not buying that right now.
All right, that will do it for us. I know there's a couple of different questions from Woodrin the Pootie and Jason McDonald. We did talk about some of your questions, answer those questions earlier in the show, so make sure to just kind of like go back to where you joined, and then you can just cut it off then. But we did talk and answer those questions that you guys have in the chat already. So just go back and listen to that. This has been Football and Other Efforts. Bluegrass has presented this, Mike. We are presented by Bluegrass Beverages. Hendersonville, been around since the 70s. Join the in crowd. Get the latest information on new products, special limited edition products. And listen, you better join the in crowd, because I know of an awesome, very awesome giveaway that is coming up soon for 2 listeners. Hopefully we get to choose one of the listeners on this show, and maybe a football show gets the other one, since we are sponsored by the parent company of Sinkers and Bluegrass. Make sure you got those notifications on. Make sure you're tuning in to every episode of both of those, because at that point, there's 2 lucky people are going to get a pretty fucking awesome prize. And it's awesome. I'm not even joking. I don't know when it's going to happen. I think it's happening in June or July. But you need to go ahead and get in the habit of listening to these shows and doing it now. And you need to get in the habit of joining the in crowd, going to Bluegrass, because maybe, just maybe, a requirement is you have to join the in crowd. So join the in crowd, Bluegrass Beverages, Sinkers in Nashville. Doesn't matter which. It works at both. Go there. And then go get you some liquor. Have some fun this weekend. Get you some liquor. Mike Herndon, he wrote a great article over at paulkarski.com about the trade up, at Mike Herndon NFL on Twitter. I'm Zach Lyons at F Words Pod, Football and Other F Words. And you have just been effed.